topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
To Triversity Talk. I'm Wendy Stewart. I'm here with you. It's Wendy on Wednesday. I don't know why I say that every week, but I do. I am very happy. Okay, it is spring and flowers are bursting out all over, even though today was like unseasonably cool in my book. You know what? I'm all about springtime. And speaking about springtime, if you are watching this show, we are based out of, Triversity is based out of Milford, Pennsylvania, but we service the tri-state area. That's New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. I am coming to you live from New York because that's where I am during the week. But Triversity, the Pride Center, has a couple of cool things coming up that I wanted to share with you. Of course, we have our game night coming up, but this Saturday, we started a new fun program. It's called Traipsing with Triversity, and it's hiking, right? Who wouldn't love, it's not hardcore hiking. It's just getting out. We have wonderful trails in the Pennsylvania area. So yeah, we hope you'll join us. And my biggest announcement about Triversity, besides all the great things they're doing, we now have started a newsletter. So if we have your email, please sign up because the newsletter is great. It has all of the events that we have coming up. And that way you can really stay on top of things. I know all of us get bombarded with so much stuff, but I love our new newsletter because it's very easy to read. The flyers on it are very, very attractive. And yeah, it's all good. Tonight, while we are broadcasting here, what is also going on is we're having a school board meeting at Delaware Valley High School in Milford, Pennsylvania. And I'm sure you read about it or hear about it later. That's all I'm going to say on that. So without further ado, I have a wonderful guest on tonight who I met at Pangea in the city at the bar. Yes, I meet a lot of people at that bar, and I meet a lot of people that are great guests on my show because it's a good cross-section of people that come in there. They're all interesting and interested, and they have something to say. Our guest tonight is a queer activist. He defines himself as an artisan and an activist. I totally love that. He originally hails from Oklahoma. It seems like everybody who is coming to New York like a magnet, they come from somewhere in the Midwest. We are a vortex in New York City. But I'm very, very happy to welcome Sean Stefanic. So put your hands together. Yay.
Thank
there
you.
You are like magic.
I'm
telling you, I just love when that happens.
Love it.
How is your night going this evening? Good night.
Yeah, very nice, very pleasant. Like you said, a little bit windy this week, but that's okay. It's still beautiful out, and I'm looking forward to warmer weather for sure. So
well, aren't we all? Because there's so much going on in the streets these days, aren't there? I mean,
yeah, a little too much.
Yeah, a little too much going on in the streets now. I know, and I can talk about this with you. There's supposed to be another protest on Saturday in New York City.
Yes.
Yeah, a big one. And
yes,
believe it or not, we have one in Milford, Pennsylvania. Again, the last one we had I was not able to make it. I was with the Imperial Court that night doing our big event, but the one in Milford had between 300 and 400 people at their hands-off rally. And this one, which is sponsored by Delaware Valley Action on Saturday, and of course, Triversity will be involved in that. I expect there'll be a big turnout, and I should be able to be at that one, which is good. So listen, we are all trying to do our part to get out there and say, what was that movie? I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. It was
Network.
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 Okay. How many times, right, have you said to yourself in the last couple of months, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore?
Every day.
Every day. So,
Yeah.
just, you know what? One of the things I loved, you sent me a bio and you wrote artisan and activist. So I guess we can start with the artisan fact and just move into the activist because that's so much a part of who you are. You came to New York from Oklahoma.
Yes, I did. I originally born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa, okay.
The youngest of 4 children, 2 older sisters and a twin brother who is now out in Los Angeles. You know, pretty much trying to do the same thing I was doing. It was a nice theatrical family and very the best circles, I would think, because given that it was Tulsa, Oklahoma, is horribly conservative, lots of that Bible Belt, thumping and all sorts of fire and brimstone. But my parents are theater people. My mom is an actress. My dad is a playwright and a producer. So I grew up at auditions and cast parties and premieres. And
so I never knew that. When I hear Tulsa, like my co-host on my other show, If These Walls Could Talk, Tim Moss, is from Indiana, not from a theatrical family, although Tim was acting for forever he was from a young kid. I had no idea about you as far as I just knew you were from Oklahoma. So you had the backing at least of a theatrical family, to come to New York and pursue your own art.
Absolutely. New York was always, growing up, New York was like that mystical place that you knew was out there. You knew it existed and you had to dare to go out and try it. So, of course, that's where I ended up. So
your twin brother, is he an identical twin?
He is. He's what we
you. Oh, there's people watching tonight that are going to be like, "Oh my God, yes." There's 2 of them that are handsome.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, we both had gone to eventually where we both ended up was film school. We both ended up in film school in Oklahoma City for a few years. And after that, we kind of decided we always were growing up, actually, a lot like Chip and Dale, the chipmunks, the Disney chipmunks.
I love Chip and Dale.
So we said, all the good and the bad, we get into the fights like they do. We team up and we take on the world like they do. And so going to New York and LA, because it was kind of like, during school, there was a real heavy point when we both were really looking at Los Angeles. But then, I also was really feeling New York after we finished and showed our thesis films and all that stuff. And so it was kind of a divide and conquer. You take that end, I'll take this end. And somehow
y'all are bi-coastal. I love it. You're covering everything coast to coast. It's interesting,
It is. It's real fun. I've gone out to visit him. He's come out to see me, and we're just twins in a way that we never had been before. Like, it's been great.
Wow. Well, you also, you grew up, you got older, right? You got more serious about what. I want to tell you a quick thing about Tulsa, Oklahoma. My husband, before he passed away, was the photographer, Alan Kaplan, and he did very big campaigns. They hired him in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is a true story. They were trying to make it attractive for companies to come there. So they're like, you have to make us look exciting. So they gave him a bunch of corporate people and had him go to like the downtown area. Alan was known in fashion for making people jump. So he had to shoot like 20 people from banks, with heavy duty corporate jobs jumping in this area in Tulsa, which I thought was so funny. The other thing was really funny when he got there, because, we're native New Yorkers. He got there. He says, Wendy said, they gave me a room in the hotel that faces a synagogue. Right. I know. I'm like, well, I said, Ellen, I guess they were, just trying to be considerate of you. He said, oh, okay. That's all it is. But anyway, that was our experience with Tulsa. And not to say anything bad about it. It was just interesting. They wanted him to make Tulsa look cool and modern and fabulous, which he did. But you know what? With your background, the background you came from with both parents in the industry, they were both working in the industry and they were based out of Tulsa.
Yeah. Tulsa really does have a really good art scene.
Great.
It really
Yes,
does. Yeah,
I'm surprised because I do know it's really conservative. And, this is my bad. We New Yorkers, we think we're all that. And when we think of other places, and we know they're conservative, they couldn't possibly have filmmakers and playwrights but obviously it's the opposite. And now anyone can be based anywhere, by the way,
Oh yeah. I think that I think that of course after the pandemic and with the way that society and the workplace has evolved, that there's a lot that people got creative and people started taking their lives, and there are everywhere else, and there's been a lot of mass exodus from bigger cities like us here in New York to some smaller cities. And I do, but it is interesting actually. Tulsa, especially the downtown art scene, blew up, and more film kind of went down there as soon as we both got out. So it was really I guess, if that was supposed to be a life lesson, I'm still going to stay in New York, but
Right. I was going to say you probably wouldn't have stayed in Tulsa anyway. And your brother probably wouldn't have stayed in Tulsa anyway. No. They say, what do they say? Some children are born of the town and some children are born of the world. And obviously the two of you are born of the world because you had a great creative background. And yet the two of you went to other places, major places where you could pursue your art. So when you came here after film school?
Yes. Yeah. I just about 2 months after film school.
Wow. And what was it like for you? Did you start doing independent films when you got here, or?
It was kind of a struggle. Nobody likes to, and we all have our dreams and our goals, and we all have that tunnel vision of going straight for that, or at least I did. So I just went for it and just kept on trying to move forward as best I could. But the truth is, I really didn't know what I was doing, as I think a lot of people who move out here from smaller cities don't know what they're doing.
Even the people that are here, let me just tell you, the ones with the trust funds, it doesn't matter. They can screw up a million ways and it won't matter. I've had this conversation with my daughter. She's like, why? I'm like, because they have a ton of money. But if you're like a normal person, you come here, you try and do your best, but it's highly competitive. There's no way you can anticipate that. And certainly in the arts, there is often no rhyme or reason. I share this with a lot of actors that I have on, because they can be brilliant and not working at all. And it never ceases to amaze me. And that never seems to change.
Yeah. No, it's totally true. It was like Tulsa was a fun time. My brother and I were both pulling in 4 or 5 shows a year at one point. So it was a fun, constantly auditioning, constantly.
Well, you were the twins. They were like, let's get those twins in here.
Yeah, there was and eventually though too, we both started branching out and doing, we weren't doing the musicals all the time. It was like, he's going to do this show at that theater and I'm going to do that show at that theater. And we didn't get in each other's way. So there
had your own platforms.
Yeah. At least it was nice to know that people were accepting of us as being our own people for the last.
Well, I think with being a twin, and I've heard this from other twins, and certainly being an identical twin, that's real. It's very hard because, it's how people stereotype people, right? They look and they see the same face on two separate people, but you know what? You're branded by that. And you're also branded by the attributes you share as brothers.
Yeah. And everybody always has that stereotypical vision of you as all moving the same and dressing the same. And,
just look-alike outfit. Oh my God. That's like,
and we're both just like, no, He likes heart. I like Susie and the Banshees. There's a very big difference in some of that kind of expression.
Let's just start with Susie and the Banshees in the Cars then, right? Yeah, you're right. You are both of you have your own identity. But again, people stereotype, right? It's what we see on the surface. I go through that with people with pronouns, you know?
Yeah.
Like your pronoun could be he, but you might, you know what I'm saying? But I might not see you. So I have to constantly remind myself to use the he when the person presenting in front of me completely has what we call feminine features or even feminine attributes. And it's constantly going on in your head. The whole thing with pronouns, and we all talk about this a lot, you know, it's very easy if the person presents one way and you get that. But when they look completely different than the pronoun they want to be called, then it's like, you know, and for me, I just fall back on they. They has become my fallback.
Yeah, I kind of do the same thing. I think like when in doubt, whip they out, and that's what I do.
Wait, what is that? I love that. When in doubt.
When in doubt, whip they out.
I love it. I'm stealing that from you. My God.
Go for
it. That say that. So when you first came to New York, how did you get involved in political things here, or what made you want to do that?
You know, even right before moving from Tulsa, you know, it was because we moved in 2012. So, of course, we were gearing up for the Obama second term. So that was going on. And there was always a part of me, I can speak for myself here, just say that there was always a part of me that wanted to be able to sit at the table and talk to people, politics, whether one-on-one or in a discussion, and know what I'm talking about. But, you know, it just always wasn't that easy for me. And even when I moved out here, I actually was here 6 years before I joined Gays Against Guns. And it was at that point that I also, through that, joined Rise and Resist. And the more I did, the more I just started paying attention to what people were saying and who they were talking about. And I just, now the politics is like, you know, everything I read, and it's, you know, total evolution right there, you know.
Right. Well, now, you know, I had a lot of friends that weren't really, you know, again, I know people in Rise and Resist and Gays Against Guns, and I knew the people that quote unquote did that, right? I came out of the time of ACT UP, but once we got drugs to manage HIV and AIDS with ACT UP, there's still people that have a lot of the attributes of ACT UP, but that is an organization there. It just didn't fill the void anymore because thank God those drugs came out. But that was a very political time and people pushing back, and silence equals death. You know, that a lot of people don't know. Some of the younger people I've had on the show, they don't know where that came from. That came from Reagan completely ignoring totally and completely ignoring that people were dying. Again, it was not talked about. And it was spreading like wildfire.
Yeah. It's, you know, and I have to say, I'm glad you brought it up because ACT UP was kind of the prelude. Actually, ACT UP is what it pushed me right into GAG. That's one of my favorite stories, is because shortly before I found GAG, I had just broken up with someone who I had gotten on PrEP so we could engage in things that couples do. And I, you know, since I was on this, you know, PrEP kick, I said, well, it was hard to talk about HIV and AIDS because Oklahoma has really bad education there, or did when I was growing up. So, you know, didn't know anything really. So when I decided I go on a path to try to do research and whatever, because I don't want to be afraid, but this is something I have to be responsible about.
Well, you have to be responsible. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I remembered the documentary a friend had suggested, How to Survive a Plague, directed by David France. And so I watched that and it blew me out of the water. That and the other documentary, United in Anger, or United in Outrage.
I think it's United in Outrage.
United in Outrage. Yeah, that was it. And I saw both of those, and, you know, my world, it's kind of like my world fell apart, but then also came together at the same time. I was completely broke down of everything I thought or had felt at that time, and immediately reconstructed to being more of the Sean who really who I need to be and who I was meant to be. Seeing my community as, instead of being the victims of society, we are the strong ones. We went out and did what we did. They went out and did what they did to get the medication to change the world, and they did that. And I have to tell you, I had never felt so proud to be a gay man and to be a gay man in New York City when I was learning all of this.
And I love hearing that, because you were completely empowered at that point. The forerunners of all of that, Joseph Sonnabend, was one of the Dallas buyer drug doctors. So we weren't dealing the drugs in Dallas, they were up here. But we had an AIDS organization called Powers, Pet Owners with AIDS Resource Service. We took care of the pets of anyone that had HIV or AIDS, and we had 250 clients and 250 volunteers, and our clients would get on board with us and then get more animals. So Steve Kahn and his husband, Howard Greenberg, I don't see them anymore. When the plague was basically over, they retired in Florida, but those two guys started this organization on their dining room table with phones, and they never had an office. It was unbelievable. And everyone I knew was dying. They didn't know one person. They just knew that this plague was out there. And that's incredible activism when you think about it's not affecting them personally, but this was happening and they knew it was so wrong and they had to do something, and they did. That's exactly.
It's totally incredible. I mean, they, and with all of them, like you said, like the Dallas buyers, and there's just like the high cost of medicine that was going on. I know there was a lot of frenzy over that. And then you have these great grassroots, these grassroots, people from the village who have this like black market where they're passing and trading and all these drugs. And on top of that, they're also taking notes. What's working? What isn't working? I mean, there was
one of them he was amazing. There were 4 doctors, I remember at the time, that were quote unquote off label. And my organization, even though we took care of pets of everyone, well, I also got to know who the doctors were, people would call me. They're like, I need to see someone. I'm like, great, go see this person. And those people never took ACT. And of course, they're still alive. Well, ACT killed so many people, and that's what they were. You know what? This is like, for me, it's like my arm was cut off during the AIDS epidemic, and it never grew back because it's something that will always be with me. For me, that was really the start of my own activism. But here we are again, Sean. Here we are. Now, you got involved first with Gays Against Guns.
Yeah, what happened was after doing extensive research on ACT UP, I was so hungry for even more answers, and I said, well, ACT UP was started at the center, so let's go there. And I grabbed a brochure, and mind you, this was also the same year that Parkland had happened, the school shooting on Valentine's Day.
Right.
That's the other half of the story, is that I was beside myself, and was angry for months, and I didn't know what to do. So I go to the center and picked up this brochure, and the first thing I saw, Gays Against Guns. And what was this? This was Sunday, and the next meeting is this Thursday, August 2nd. I'm just going to have to go to that.
And was absolutely perfect. And you're talking about the LGBTQ Center on 13th Street, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was everything I needed it to be and more. I mean, and I'm still so close and in love with everybody there that I have known since day one. They're still like the loves of my life out here, really. I love them all,
Well, and you're also very lucky that you were in New York and you found this community. I mean, this is what Triversity does in Milford, Pennsylvania. But again, our reach is far, and I'm very proud that we have this brick and mortar organization in an area where it is desperately needed. I always say in New York, you can find a gazillion people that are like you, that have the same beliefs as you, and you can all get behind each other. It's much harder, right, in the rural areas, in the Midwest, and places like that. And I think of the kids, like a bunch of people from our organization if not all of them. My whole board is at that school board meeting tonight. I'm the only one that's based out of New York during the week, but they're all there, and they all have on their T-shirts. And I'm so proud of all of them, like that they care, that they're involved, that what is going on is not acceptable to them. Absolutely acceptable.
Yeah, you were mentioning, how it's easier for us than it is in the rural people. And that kind of reminded me of something that my brother had said, and he was right, is that in this disgusting situation that we're currently facing, that's like if this were the Titanic about to go under, New York and LA, where he and I live, are first class. We know we're going to be okay. But we know that mom and dad are like third class, and we're not okay with that, And, some of the people that we still know back in Oklahoma who are dear family friends who.
Oh my God, I would imagine. Yeah, you have a ton of people there that watch what you're doing and love what you're doing, and they've got your back no matter what. But we are really in a pickle right now, and it goes across the boards. I'm sure, read about the thing with Honduras and like how people are treated in jail there. Never mind, like these people that they want to send are citizens. Like when it starts to happen that they start to ship citizens out of their own country. This is really, really scary stuff. This is scary stuff.
It's like, it's honestly, because we're there. We all know we're already there. There's no, we're almost there. The point is we are there, and it's only a matter of time before we start to see it happening to people like you and me.
It could happen in a heartbeat. I mean, I never did write hateful things on social media because you never know where it's going to end up. And quite frankly, I don't use social media to be attacked. I use social media to advocate, educate, and entertain. But not everybody does that. And that's a bit scary, right? When your opinion's out there. I heard this from someone that was on one of my other shows, a musician, that she traveled to Europe and toured and then came back here. There were tours set up with musicians that like from the UK that were supposed to come here, and they were denied. Do you understand? I don't know enough about that. When did that happen?
I don't know, like you, not too much, but I am aware that people who leave the country have a hard time getting back in. That's even like citizens, like you leave, and then when you come back, it's like they put you through the grinder before they let you back in. That's what I've heard. Like, I don't know, but that's what I've heard.
Right, I'm hearing that too, but that's really kind of scary because, there are people that are just going to other places and then coming back here, and, you start to say to yourself, then you get into the paranoia. Oh my God, what if I get pulled off the line? What if they pull up something that they deem inappropriate in your social media? Remember, we're all under like a freaking microscope now.
Yeah. And I also and I'm glad you bring that up too, because this was something I didn't know about. My brother used to have a job in compliance, and he was doing this stuff with the LAPD and he had a very interesting job for a while, and he was telling me about IP addresses, which are the footprints that we leave on the internet. And it's like, once it's there, honey. And I have to be honest, I have been pretty brash online before. So I'm kind of thinking if they ever
because they can look you. I'm not super technical, but I know they can look you up through your IP address.
Yeah, exactly.
And pull up everything about you.
Yeah. They like all your footprints are there. And my brother was telling me about that. And it was at that point, and that was probably like a year ago, I stopped, being so brash about things.
Right. Right.
And that was even before the election too. So.
Well, right. You can tell it to another person, but you have to be careful. You have to be careful what you say now. Now, I had Jay Tucker on, of course, from Gays Against Guns. And my first friend who turned me on to Gays Against Guns was not the fabulous Libby Edwards, but she talked about, I love Libby, but Brian Butterick.
Yeah.
Brian Butterick was a dear friend who left us too soon. And
Yeah.
I remember I did Pride every year. I do Pride every year. And I was like, it was probably the first year. Gays Against Guns was formed when? When was that formed?
2016.
Yeah, so that's fairly new to me. And I remember talking to Brian that year for the march and asking him, and he said he was marching with Gays Against Guns. And I'm like, oh, well, who are they? And then I started seeing them popping up at various places and talking to people. And it turned out a lot of people I knew were with Gays Against Guns, GAG as called. Yeah.
GAG, yeah. And that's the other thing too I liked about when I went from GAG to Rise and Resist and seeing how well connected the entire community was. Everybody does know everybody, or everybody knows who everybody is, and it's just such a beautifully interwoven community of support, and most people see
everything's back, So for people that don't know, right, that are listening because this show's nationwide, what is the difference between Gays Against Guns and Rise and Resist, and where do they overlap?
Gays Against Guns is more of a central issue, being gun violence and gun violence prevention. Rise and Resist is basically anything and anything goes, although I can't say that, but it covers a lot of different areas. There actually isn't any, I think because GAG exists, there isn't anybody, there aren't any subcommittees or groups that target gun violence or gun violence prevention, but you have people that work with ADA disability causes. There are committees that do postcarding and work with, other political action committees to get, messages across. And then you have, and then they have an actions committee. And of course, their actions center around everything from, picketing outside of the towers owned by the Jabba the Hutt that we're currently dealing with, or sometimes we do silent protests, a lot of silent protests in major halls, not so much anymore in Grand Central Station. I think they actually banned everyone from doing something there after the Palestine 2 years ago this fall. But the themes range from everyone being welcome here, diversity and inclusivity, everybody is welcome here. This is an asylum city, especially the country itself, an asylum nation, everything from that. I love the fact that they have a committee for ADA disability, because over here by where I live in Woodside, Queens, the Woodside train station now has elevators. I know things like that are because of the work that people like Rise and Resist do. So it's fabulous. It's
right.
Amazing.
It is ironic that Rise and Resist existed long before the new terminology that we are hearing now, which is just resist, resist, resist. Rise and Resist was really the first shot out of the bag. And both GAG and Rise and Resist were talking about Project 2025 before anybody else was. I had Jay Tucker on this show, and there was just little grumblings about it. And it was, I want to say, like maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And that was all he talked about. And I only knew very little because I know people in these groups, but I never thought it as horrific as when Jay finished with me that night. And then I was Googling and I'm like, oh my God, the first thing I said is, if this is going to happen, this is huge. And then I started telling people I knew about it, and they had never heard about it. And now we're watching one page after the other come out of it.
It is, when Jay first started talking about it, because I just love him. He's just like one of my most favorite people in the whole world.
You know what? He's really he's an incredible leader. He's just got that whole thing about him. He could tell you anything and you would follow him. I first met him in a play that one of our mutual friends did. And it was Uptown. JC?
JC Augustine,
He was in that. He's as equally good as an actor as he is as a speaker. He's just a bigger than life person.
He is. And, when he first, like you said, was talking about Project 2025, I don't know. I somehow I expected it, and yet at the same time it shocked me. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's because coming from Oklahoma, like I feel like the Exorcist kind of at this point. Like he had battled the demon once before, now he must do so again. And I just kind of feel like because in Tulsa, this kind of evil hatred, I saw that in the faces and heard that from the words of so many people growing up. Now, don't get me wrong, my parents were great, all that was great. They did their best, but it wasn't, I mean, it's Oklahoma. Like it was going to, unfortunately, my brother and I were not, we weren't, what's the word I'm thinking of, immune to the hatred and the
and I was going to ask you, because you
stuff.
were very protected by your family, and I'm sure your parents had tons of like-minded people, but you still had to go to school, and there were two of you. Were you bullied or left alone because there were two of you? You were bullied.
Quite bullied. I have a lot of, I'll just be honest and say, I'm open about myself. I have a lot of emotional problems because of that. PTSD, OCD, a lot of social anxiety that sometimes can hit. I mean, I'm working on that now. I've been in therapy, in real consistent therapy for about 4 years now, and it's been more under control than it's ever been, but it's taken a lot of time,
Right. Right.
And
But,
my brother's the same. Like it's, dealing with all of this is really triggering for us because it makes us feel like we're dealing with all of that all over again. And it's
well,
just,
I was going to say that it's triggering. And, let's keep in mind, okay, the pandemic got swept under the rug. I didn't get over the pandemic. I talk about it on all my show. And people say, why the hell are you still talking about the pandemic? I'm like, because COVID's still out there. I'm walking in the East Village today, and there's still, I take the buses and subways, people have masks on, and it's not because they're sheep or crazy. They have masks on because people we know, there's a couple of people we mutually know have had COVID in the last couple of weeks. I was definitely ill by the time I got to the doctor. I think the new COVID tests negative, by the way. I don't think it tests. And that's been my theory. I had a cough. I had that horrible cough that lasted well over a month. I know people that have had it for 6 to 8 weeks. You can hear it. You can hear it when you're out. So we never dealt with that. That got swept under the rug. The fact that in, large urban centers like New York, I live near every hospital. There were refrigerator trucks. All right. That's still, Sean. And I'm not, it damaged me. It brought me back to AIDS. That's what it did. It brought me back to St. Vincent's Hospital.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other problem too. When the pandemic happened, and I only realized this just a little over a year ago, I was re-traumatized by the pandemic. After years after the pandemic, like in 21, 22, and 23, I basically was an 11-year-old boy again. It was so bad. And I lost both of my dad's parents died of COVID too. I am like really
so sorry. Oh,
yeah, it's scary. I mean, even now, I still mask up when I take the train anywhere. I still mask up. And like I was seeing someone about a year ago, and we got on the train, and I pull the mask and I put the mask on, and he sort of like shakes his head like, "Oh no, why you do that?" I'm like, "Don't you tell me not? Don't you dare!"
Good for you. Good for you.
I said, you are not going to mess with my health. If I want to wear this damn mask, I'm going to wear this damn mask. You're not going to stop me. What are you embarrassed because I care about my body? You know what I mean? So I'm glad you brought it up because, Right.
Good. And good for you. You know what? You took an action. Okay. You took an action and right. And excuse me, any partner you want to be with has to respect you for taking an action. That's still out there. So we never got rid of that. And now what happened in November, believe it or not, I don't know what your feelings were beforehand, but I knew just from the grumblings on the internet and going to different sites and everything. I knew we were screwed. I absolutely knew it. So my anxiety started before the election. And unfortunately, like you, I'm surrounded with a lot of people that, we're all like-minded, and people were like, Wendy, that's negative. I'm like, I am not a negative person, but I am a realistic person. And I could see how things were, but you know what it is? I think people have been dumbed down. I think they were messed up from the pandemic. I think there's a lot of hate in this country, a lot of hate. And I think you put all of those things together, and that's why we are where we are now. Okay. And we didn't get here because everybody's enlightened.
No, it's true. We got, and you know, it's going to get even worse, because let's just call it out for what it is. This entire planet, let alone our country, has been traumatized, like you said, by the pandemic. Yep, that's what we were just talking about. The very thing that we both know they sweep under the rug. We haven't dealt with that. It's going to get bad. The fact that we haven't dealt with that, when you don't deal with the problem, what happens?
Well, exactly, Sean. And there's a lot of components to this. We have our political situation, and then we have climate change, which is as huge as our political situation. And now those two things are going to be intertwined. I don't have to tell you that. And we were talking before the show, that wind, when I talk to even a lot of the people we know about the wind, they look at me like I'm freaking crazy. That wind that spread those LA fires, the strong wind that we have had every single day for the last 4 months. And I have talked to scientists, and this is not crazy time or Wendy looking something up on YouTube. They told me why this wind is there and how it relates to climate change. I'm not a scientist, so I can't articulate what they told me, but I'm not crazy. This wind is a bad thing. And extreme temperatures and all of that.
Yeah, well, and I wish I could know what the scientists told you, because I once took an oceanography course, and I know that that like when the waves come in, like the waves in the ocean and the moon are connected, there's this whole gravity element that's going on there. And so basically, you never know that something all the way up there and something all the way down here are connected, because this universe is like the ear, nose, and throat and the whole body. Like, it's all connected. We have to respect everything about it. And we're not,
No, we're totally not. That wind has got to do with the warming up of the planet. That much I know. And it was explained to me scientifically how that happens. But we got a whole lot coming down the pike. So what do you do? What do you tell yourself to empower yourself every day? And how do you take news in? Like, what's your personal agenda with all of this?
I always read my news right before I shouldn't, but I do. I take in my news before I go to work. And I do prepare myself by just remembering, because I get really emotional about it. And from that other, my work day could be so bad if I get mad at something before I start. So I really do have to keep it. I've become very selective about what I read in the morning, because I know the day is going to be affected if I let that get to me in some way. But I'm never not reading the news. Even throughout the middle of the day, I'll pull my phone out, go to Yahoo for a minute. Yahoo's a pretty good place to get news. So I take a look at that, and I keep it, increments, not all at once.
That is, by the way, exactly what I do, because I have to function. I'm out there. I do podcasts. I audition. I can't show up all messed up. And nobody wants to talk about this stuff except in our circles. So I take it off of my phone in the morning. And then when I'm on the subway, I'll look at it again. But the one thing I will tell you, including Yahoo News, all these news things, they aggregate it from other news sources. So, and they pump up the language, like True. If you I check stock market because it's indicative of many things, right? And it's always stock market tumbles. I look at the language they use and pay attention to that. They use sensational language. Now, when you watch it on TV, it's even worse. The sensational language from the newscasters is like, oh my God, the world is. I know. It's like
it is. There's no more honesty. It's all performance now. I've noticed that about everyone. It doesn't matter which side or what you're saying, whether it's the news or the weather. I don't like it. I don't like where we've gone with any of
Neither.
that.
You
Yeah.
know, I totally agree with you on that. But as long as you know, right, what you're looking for, you can stay informed. I do read news from other places. The BBC, I'll compare the BBC to Yahoo. The New York Times has become more sensational than it ever was. And I want to say, shame on you, because Times Magazine section always had great articles in it. Now the news that comes through on your phone from the New York Times, like the daily stuff, it could be from the Post, it could be from any of those places. They've sensationalized it. I wish people would stop doing that. Tell the truth. Is the truth
Exactly.
so hard to say?
Yeah, exactly. It's like they have this. It just, what's the word I'm thinking? It gives them this like electric shock to just put it all up in that headline,
Right.
to try to really stump the reader, or really like, did you see this?
Yeah, it is that.
You know,
It is
it
that. I
is.
recently got contacted, and I thought it was, more spam or just another site that I had unsubscribed from. It's called Nice News. And
Yeah.
I started reading it, and they had this story about the elephants that surrounded their young when that earthquake there was an earthquake in
Mhm.
on the other side of the world, and the adult elephant surrounded the baby, and this was a true story.
I saw that. I saw that. Yeah.
But that's what they have on Nice News. So I'm subscribed to it. And I also wrote to them today and I said, you guys need to have a podcast and I would love to host it. I did. That's exactly.
Yes.
So yeah, I need Nice News too. So Sean, my God, we're running down to the wire here. So what's the plan? What's your plan? How is your plan to go forward and everything and keep your head together?
My plan is to, never back down, but, I'm doing it differently this time around. I'm definitely not like headbutting the situation like I did during the last time.
Right.
Of course, during the last time I found gag in the last 2 years of that particular situation. So I was right where I needed to be. I felt so safe, and now here of course, this is a different situation, but I'm not going to stop. And as we had discussed earlier, there's a lot of really bad stuff going on with people and being deported from the country. And the fact that this current situation, they want to start coming after people like you and me, for instance, who might want to, because we're out in the streets and we're making noise and we're not. And of course, they'll take me away. If they do, they'll say that I'm a criminal. They'll say that I'm a domestic terrorist, and
Well, they can say
Yeah.
anything. Look what's happening at our universities. I mean, come
Yes.
on. Columbia University is like, wow.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
Columbia
What's
University.
happening? Like, oh my God.
Yeah, but Harvard turned around and went like that,
Oh,
Harvard
yeah.
University, oh yeah, because they pulled something, I forgot the exact number, the billions, and they're like, no, we're not backing down. I don't know. I don't know what is going to happen going forward. I just know that as a human being, I can't live a fear-based life. I really can't.
No,
And
yeah. Basically, I'm not going to stop doing anything, and if they get worse, I'll just be more persistent, because, the bullying. If there's one thing that when the pandemic set in, and we were already dealing with the last situation when that pandemic set in, my brother and I had many come to Jesus talks, so to speak, in which we were really reconciling our bullying experience and how it was really setting us up to deal with this, because these are the exact same kind of people that we were bullied by.
totally.
We're seeing them in the news. They're doing it to us now. And I'm like, guess what? I ain't some scared 11-year-old kid. I'm the guy that's going to knock your teeth out if you come after me now. So,
Well, and you also have a lot of people behind you. Remember, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in high school or junior high, you
Yeah,
didn't
true.
have masses behind you. It's really good to know when people have your back.
It
You know,
is. It is. I
it
mean,
lets
as
you,
mad as I get, you can't keep me from smiling when I'm out there with all of my gaggers and,
right,
the people you and I know,
fellow gaggers. Well, I loved having you on the show. I'm glad we finally moved from the bar at Pangea to this podcast. And
This has been
nothing always makes
wonderful.
me say Nugget likes to say hi.
Oh, the baby.
Chihuahua. Well, I'm going to take my picture. I always take a picture at the end. Something to remember us by. A few. Cheese. Cool. Thank you, Sean, so much. I am sure I am going to see you at one of the events.
Oh yeah, yeah, there, you know, and thank you so much for having me. This has been a lovely time.
Oh my gosh, I love hearing that. And you are a lovely person, but also thank you for everything that you're doing. And you're with a number of people who I know, they're all like wonderful, caring, empathetic people. That word empathy, I don't know what happened to it, but you know, seems to be not in the language these days.
No, I know. It's funny. There's that quote about Hannah Arendt said about the death of empathy is it happens right before, you know, the evil wave takes over or something, which I love that quote, not only because it's true, but because when about almost 20 years ago, I was in a production called Hannah and Martin about her and her love affair with a Nazi German guy named Martin Heidegger, who was also a professor of philosophy. So yeah. It's like we're seeing this again, and it's just crazy. So
and life imitating art, imitating life, and there you have it.
And thank you so much. I've had
You're the best, and thank you to everybody who tuned in tonight. If you're celebrating Easter with the Easter Bunny, or you celebrated Passover, remember your family and friends. It might be alone, and invite them along if you're going on an Easter egg hunt on Sunday. And be well, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.